Namaste and good evening, everyone. On behalf of Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, and India Water Portal, I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI, welcome you to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered here for a panel discussion on Environment and Budget 2021 Business as Usual. I would like to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Simi Mehta, who is CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI, and Ms. Ambika Vishwanath, who is co-founder and director, Kuberin Initiative, and non-resident fellow, Agrora Strategy Institute, Germany. Thank you. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ritika. A very good evening to everyone. On behalf of the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at IMPRI and India Water Portal, I welcome you heartily to this important panel discussion. The Union Budget 2021 was presented on 1st February by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. While this was touted to be the mother of all budgets, what are its actual implications for the environment? Is there anything remarkable this year which was absent or not talked about in the previous budgets? Or does the budget 2021 yield to anything substantial in the country's fight against the threats of climate change, the environmental excesses, and also are there anything measurable for the restoration, conservation, and also preservation of India's ecosystem? Or is it just status quoist or business as usual? To discuss these and other important environmental aspects of Budget 2021, we have a very distinguished panel of experts this evening, chaired by Mr. Ashish Kothari, founder member, Kalpvriksh, Pune. Our panelists for this evening are Dr. Indira Khurana, Vice Chair of Tarun Bharat Sangh, Professor Kanchan Chopra, former Director and Professor, Institute of Economic Growth, University of Delhi, Mr. Himanshu Thakkar, Coordinator, South Asia Network on Dams, Rivers and People, New Delhi, and Mr. Debaditya Sinha, Senior Resident Fellow at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. Ms. Ambika Vishwanath, co-founder and director, Kubernetes Initiative, and non-resident fellow, Agora Strategy Institute, Germany, would be co-moderating the event with me. So without wasting any time, I request and invite Mr. Ashish to begin with the deliberations. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Simi, and Ambika and Arjun and everybody else who's put this together. I think we're going to have a very exciting 1.5 hours. It's always the budget, whenever it's presented, is always, of course, big news. But this is probably one of the first times that we're actually having an almost immediate discussion on the ecological and environmental implications of the budget. So congratulations for putting that together. I'm just going to start with a few opening comments and remarks. More from a lay perspective. I think the 4 experts will give us much more expert comments, but just a few comments. I remember back in 1991 when Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was then finance minister, brought in the so-called economic reforms, liberalization, economic globalization, and so on. He had SPWD, Society for Promotion of Wastelands Development, had organized a lecture that he gave on the economic reforms and the environment. It was a very interesting lecture. And one of the things that he had said when I actually asked him a question after the lecture, saying, how do you propose to actually protect the environment, given that liberalization can actually cause a lot of damage? And he said that all countries have gone through this kind of a curve in which you become more prosperous, you have more growth, and then you have the money to be able to put back into environmental protection. And of course, I pointed out a number of flaws in that. But one of the things that then we were tracking after that for at least 15 years was there actually more money going into the environment? By looking at the budget of the Ministry of Environment, for instance, the pollution control boards and so on. And what I noticed was that that was simply not the case. All the way up to the early 2000s when I stopped tracking it, and maybe our panelists can tell us more of what the current situation is. But the percentage of budget going to the Ministry of Environment and related institutions was actually dropping. And it was around a little less than 1% at that time. It dropped to about 0.5%. I don't know what it is right now, but I'd be very surprised if it has substantially gone up percentage-wise. So there is a lot more money in the economy. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that investment is going into environmental protection. The second very important thing I think here is it's not just about the quantum of money, how much money is going into the environmental sector, but also how it's used. What is the effectivity of the use of that money? So for instance, we've poured literally thousands of crores of rupees into cleaning up our rivers. Ganga is one of the biggest flagship programs and many others. And we know even from the statistics of the Pollution Control Board itself that that hasn't really achieved very much. I'm sure Himanshu and others will throw more light on that. In the 2021 budget also, there's a significant increase in the urban drinking water. I think that's a huge jump, and maybe the panelists can again tell us this. So in quantum, that seems good, but will it actually be achieving results on the ground is a huge question that needs to be asked. The third aspect, which I think is very important, is probably even more important than the first two, is to look at the non-environment sectors which have an environmental impact. So for instance, I just took a very quick look at the figures, and I'm sure Arjun and your team are going to present them. But I found, if I'm not mistaken, that the chemical fertilizer subsidy is about almost 80,000 crores of rupees. Now, you can talk anything about organic farming, and you even have a zero budget line in the budget and so on, but zero budget farming line in the budget, but that's going to mean nothing if the subsidy is all towards ecologically destructive agriculture. We have, I mean, just to take another couple of quick examples from this, 11,000 kilometers more of national highways are going to be funded in this 1 year. We know for a fact across India that a lot of these highways and expressways are going right through ecologically very fragile areas and socially very fragile areas also, Adivasi lands, etc. And there's some lip service that is paid that will make these bridges for wildlife to cross and stuff like that, but we know that most of that never actually takes place or doesn't work. On the other hand, there's also an 18,000 crore rupee item for public transport, which may be good, depending on, again, how it's used. So you can find maybe elements of both kinds on this third aspect of non-environmental budget lines which have an environmental impact. We know also, for instance, that most of the budget is made up of concessions, for instance, or tax breaks, for instance, to industries, especially in so-called backward areas, which also happen to be, of course, ecologically and socially very sensitive areas. So how much does that get offset by the environment budget is also a big question. And the last point I'd make, which is a point of process. This is fundamental to the problems of our democracy, that when this kind of budgeting or planning takes place, it still remains highly centralized. Who is involved in the formulation of these plans and budgets? Is it the people on the ground? Is it some so-called expert sitting in New Delhi? Who is really involved? And how does one actually make this kind of a process which impacts all of us much more participatory, much more democratic? Is a question, again, that the panelists might want to get into. So that's just a few comments, opening comments from my side. I'm now going to turn to our very exciting set of panelists with a series of 3 questions. And they'll all get some time to answer these 3 questions. And then we'll open it up for looking at questions from the audience.
Sir, we can also present some slides for the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have such, yeah, please go ahead. Yes, yes.
Ritika, you are on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. Just to set the tone of the deliberation, research team at IMPRI has prepared one presentation, a short presentation. I request Nidhi to start with the presentation.
Ritika, presentation.
Yeah. So, hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Sunidhi Agarwal, joining from Jamshedpur, Jharkhand. I'm a researcher at IMPRI, and I would like to give a brief presentation that our IMPRI team has prepared on the Environment and Budget 2021 Business as Usual panel discussion. As we all know, that the coronavirus outbreak is the greatest challenge we have faced since World War II and is a defining global health crisis of our time, which brought significant economic disruption. To tackle this, the government ordered a nationwide lockdown in the month of March 2020. During this phase of lockdown, the government announced three different Atmanirbhar Bharat stimulus packages with the vision to make the country and its citizens independent and self reliant. With regard to this year's budget holds crucial importance to India's economic growth, considering the massive damage the coronavirus pandemic has done. The budget for 2021 to 2022 has several new ideas to get the economy going again. Several key announcements include the hydrogen energy mission for generating hydrogen from green power sources and capital infusion of rupees 1000 crore to the Solar Energy Corporation of India and rupees 1500 crore to the IREDA. The budget also presented the Clean Air Program. Hello. Yeah, sorry. The budget also presented the Clean Air Program with a fund for air pollution control in 42 cities. Yeah, I'm so sorry. The budget also presented the Clean Air Program with a fund for air pollution control in 42 cities with a million plus population along the voluntary vehicle scrapping policy to phase out old and unfit vehicles and strengthening of urban Swachh Bharat mission. The budget also included the Deep Ocean Mission, which covers deep ocean survey exploration and projects for the conservation of deep sea biodiversity, and the most important, Jal Jeevan Mission Urban, which aims at better water supply nationwide. Over to you, Nikhil. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunidhi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nikhil Jacob, researcher at IMPRI, joining from Goa. The budget 2021 saw a considerable increase in its outlay, with a 14% increase in overall expenditure and a whopping 29% increase in capital expenditure. However, when we look at the allocations for the Environment Ministry, it has seen a decrease compared to the 2020 budget estimates. With this background, I would like to draw your attention to some of the key allocations in the budget that have a direct impact on the environment. The only major increase in allocation was noted under the head of Jal Jeevan Mission, which aims at achieving universal water supply. Some other notable aspects are the discontinuation of allocations for pollution abatement and the very low allocations under Climate Change Action Plan, among others. Apart from these, it is pertinent to take into consideration allocations to other sectors and domains which may have an indirect impact on the environment. For example, an increasing trend noticed in schemes aimed at promoting organic fertilizers will have a positive impact on soil health. But the allocations have to improve significantly to see desirable outcomes. Also, the increased allocations for laying new railway lines or doubling the existing ones could lead to considerable environmental damage if not done in a sustainable manner. Thank you. Over to Manuswini.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Manoswini Sarkar, a master's student at the Graduate Institute of Geneva and a researcher at EMPRI. So, the budget 2021 becomes more important in the background of two important events, the NIP and the COP26. It is estimated that within the National Infrastructure Pipeline, which was announced in 2019, rupees 100 lakh crore would be invested on infrastructure over the next 5 years. It includes projects in the fields of logistics, energy, water and sanitation, communication, social infrastructure such as health and education, and commercial infrastructure. The next event is regarding India's third biennial update report, the BUR, to the UNFCCC and the Conference of Parties COP26, which will be held in November 21 in the UK. This budget can contribute significantly towards achieving India's NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions, which include an overall reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to achieve about 40% electric power from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030, and to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent through additional forests and tree cover by 2030. So it will be interesting to note how budget 2021 fits into this. And with this, I would like to thank you and open the floor to our esteemed speakers. We look forward to hearing and to learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashish sir, over to you. Yes.
Okay, thank you, IMPRI team. That provides us a very good context for the discussion. Okay, so let's start with the panel. I'm going to start with the. Do we need the slide? Can we take the slide off so we can see each other better? Yes, thank
Yes.
you.
Sir, your camera
Yeah, I just realized that. I'm going to start with the youngest of them, which is Professor Kanchan Chopra. Kanchanji.
Like that.
So I'm going to ask the same question to all four of you. Let's start with Kanchanji, which is in a couple of minutes, if you can explain, just tell us a little bit about your work and how it relates to the topic of today. And what is the sort of one thing that really strikes you about this budget? Could be positive, negative, neutral, whatever.
Thank you, Ashish, and also for that introduction as the youngest person around here. Anyway, well, my work, I have been working in the area of environment and development and ecosystem services, ecological economic modeling, and so on. In the last few years and throughout, policy has been one of my focal areas. My last book was called Environmental Policy and Development in India. From that perspective, the budget to me is an event which is of a short run nature. It's important for the year in which it is presented. It gives us a direction about how the government intends to spend its money and collect its money. It is, of course, a very centrally driven document, and most of the time, policy targets are quite different from these short-run directions. At the same time, the sectoral allocations that the budget talks about give us an indication of where the government wants to proceed, the direction in which it wants to move. To that extent, the general public looks on the budget as an indication of what it wants to do, what the government wants to do. And it has a certain significance in terms of its sectoral allocations, which we were just told about by the IMPRI team. We were also told about the fact that I'll come to the environmental part later, the environment and the budget. The third point I'd like to make is that the indications that the government gives us are also important, not only in the sector in which we are, to which we are looking, but also in related sectors. So what happens to technology, what happens to incentives in related sectors is as important as what the government says about the environmental sector. Now, this year's budget, against the backdrop of COVID and also to my mind against the backdrop of the economic survey which preceded it, there were a whole lot of expectations from it. Of course, the COVID is something of a dampener, but the economic survey which preceded the budget had a whole chapter on sustainable development, and in the international scene, as well as what we have been doing within the country. Now, all this led to expectations from the budget, at least about some pointers about how in the short run the government was going to move ahead. Now, to my mind, the biggest thing that it is a kind of, uh, to my mind, it's a, I'd say, business as usual budget. A little, a little not so encouraging as far as the focus on the environment is concerned. Of course, the funds to the Ministry of Environment have been decreased. That is
Kanchanji,
fine.
sorry to interrupt you. We'll come back to you with some of these
Okay,
details in the second round. So
okay,
right now, I
okay.
just wanted to get that overview, and thanks for
Okay,
giving us that
that's
overview.
fine.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
no, that's fine. That's fine. I'll
Uh,
come back later.
yes, please. We'll have plenty of time for 2 more rounds.
Uh-huh.
Himanshu, over to you. How does your work relate to this subject, and what do you think is sort of one overarching thought in your head about this budget? You're on mute, Himanshu.
Thanks, Ashish. We at South Asia Network on Dams, Rivers and People, as our name suggests, look at the issues related to dams and rivers. But we also look at the broader environment governance because that drives what kind of dams and rivers policies are going to be taken up. And we have been looking at also the functioning of bodies like the Environment Appraisal Committee and the Forest Advisory Committee and this National and State Board of Wildlife, which are all also decision-making bodies under the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So, I mean, this just gives you that we are looking at some of these issues on a consistent way. To answer your question, what strikes you most about this budget is, firstly, I mean, it's a common knowledge that the present regime doesn't have much love for environment, actually. It has been possibly the worst environment governance situation we are in today. And this budget actually is consistent with that track record. In the whole, I mean, as the IMPRI team has shown, the actual allocations for the ministry has come down, not only with respect to budgets previous year, but I mean, that's in actual terms. If you look at the real terms in terms of the inflation adjusted values, it will be even lower. That's for one part. But if you look
Himanshu, let's just start with that for the moment. We'll come back to you with more details on positive.
And I'll finish with one sentence.
Yeah.
If you look through the budget, I mean, the speech of the finance minister, in the whole speech, she doesn't talk about environment at all. This word ecology doesn't figure. Environment word figures twice, once in the context of Jal Jeevan Mission. And IMPRI team has also put that allocation under Jal Jeevan Mission under environment, but that's a misconception. It cannot be under environment because that's the infrastructure funding actually. They're going to put pipelines and tapes, and that's not really directly related to environment conservation and protection. And the second time it comes is in terms of the voluntary vehicle scrapping policy, which could be, but we are voluntary. So we are not sure how it is going to help the environment. This shows that the government is not bothered, that people know that they are not bothered about environment.
Thanks. Okay, we're going to come back to you, especially on the drinking water thing, but also some of the other aspects. Indira, over to you, the same question.
Thanks, Ashish, and thanks IMPRI and the other organizers for inviting me on this panel. Ashish, I'll just try and briefly answer one of the questions that you spoke about, and what's the title of today's discussion? The budget environment in this budget 2021, business as usual. I would put it at just business, full stop. I largely work on water. A lot of my time and my work and my learning has been around water resources, including drinking water. And if I just take on about COVID-19, which the speakers before me and even Impri mentioned, I think we need to realize that COVID-19 and other such emerging zoonotic diseases are happening because we are tampering with nature, and we are increasing the rate at which we are doing deforestation, and we are going closer to animals and and to regions where we should not be. And because we are even cutting the forest, the animals are coming out of their their core areas, and they're going to areas where humans reside, and that's why there are a whole lot of new emerging infectious diseases. 75% of these are, due to zoonotic diseases, which are transferred from animals to humans. So this is something I think that we need to keep in mind. Also, this brought about a huge spike in the use of water because hygiene all became really, really important. And as a person who works on water and particularly drinking water, when I saw the budget for rural drinking water supply, which is 50,000 crore for 1 year, it should have made me happy. But I think, and as Himanshu briefly mentioned, what we're looking at is very large infrastructure projects to reach out to people if we want to provide them functional household tap connections. And unfortunately, we have not learned from our past decades of experience of providing rural drinking water that you cannot have such a target-driven approach. And the main issue I think that we need to consider is, where is the water? We are saying, but if you make all this infrastructure.
Sorry, Indiraji, I'm going to come back to you with more details on this, especially given your work on decentralized water harvesting in Rajasthan and elsewhere. This will be a very valuable perspective, but we will come back to you in this second round on that.
Thank you.
If that's okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
So last, Debaditya.
Thank you. So I work at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy as a senior resident fellow. So where I see like how the important environmental laws are implemented and also judgments. And I also have an organization called Vindhyan Ecology Naturalisty Foundation, which works for conservation of landscape and wildlife in Mirzapur region of UP. So my work is basically on interface of ecology, law, and policy. So I come from a science background, but my mostly work is on policy and law. So this is my background. And budget is very important because see, like. Because budget also shows like the issues which government is serious and they think it is important. Okay, and any policy, any implementation will depend heavily on the budget. And it's not only that. And right now I will just because you asked me what is the opinion on the budget in a very brief. So I will say that the focus is entirely on addressing some pollution thing, like providing drinking water or abatement of pollution. But the real issues are also like we should be ecological centric, like protection of forest, which are not protected area. 20% of India is forest, but only 5% protected area, and the protection of the river, like in a pristine form. So all these things are important, and this budget has also seen reduction in investment in institutes and different things. So I will come to it in detail later. Right now, I think I will just say it is like, as usual, it is clearly said, as Himanshu sir and others said, that it is a clear indication of what the government thinks. And the budget is the same. It is not like beyond anything, I will say any exemplary or anything outstanding. It is just as usual, as expected.
Thanks, Debaditya. And okay, so I'm going to go into a second round now with a slightly different order, if that's okay with you. Let's focus a little bit on water, because I think that's obviously a very, very crucial issue. We're coming now into a water deficient season, so-called water deficient season, as summer approaches, spring and summer approaches. And so clearly that it's, as always in summer, water is going to become a big issue. So Himanshu, let's start with you. You already started saying some things about the drinking water scheme, which has had a huge jump, but you don't have to restrict yourself to that. What do you think are there any positive aspects to this at all? And and of course, you already started talking about
Ashish for some time. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you, Ashish.
Yeah, Ashish, your voice is breaking.
Oh,
no, I could hear clearly Ashish's voice. I think it could be
I
there
couldn't
your end. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Impri team, was I clear or?
Video is also breaking.
Yeah, yes, sir. Voice is clear.
Yeah, it's clear here also.
I think it's a problem, Indiraji and Kanchanji, on your side.
No, no,
Yeah.
there's
I
some
can hear you now. Now I can hear you. That's
Okay.
yes, some lag
Okay.
happens if we be patient. Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll just repeat in a second. I was just saying that I'm going to change the order a bit. Let's try and focus on water for a short time. And since both Himanshu and Indira have spoken about that, already started talking about it, I'm asking them, do they think there's anything positive at all in the budget on, say, issues like water? Or is it mostly, like they're saying, business as usual or even worse? Himanshu, let's start with you. You have about 5
Right.
minutes.
Thanks, Ashish. Yeah. So one thing is that Jal Jeevan Mission, they have been putting a lot of money in the rural areas for the last 2 years, and they have continued, and now they are going to launch this year the urban drinking water mission also. The problem with that is that, I mean, it's laudable, but the problem is it just takes technologically one size fits all kind of technology, that pipes and tapes will be provided to everyone, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, whether it is sustainable or not, whether it is the best option or not. Nobody is asked. There's no choice for anybody. It is just top down thrust on the people. And there is no environment social impact assessment. In fact, we are in a very remarkable situation where if you build a huge dam, and if the dam is supposed to be providing water for urban areas or industrial areas, then you don't even need environment clearance or EIA or environment management plan or any monitoring or compliance, no appraisal, nothing. And that's going to be part of this part also. They're not looking at sustainability at all. In fact, they didn't look, they themselves, the economic survey 2 years back itself accepted that the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan did not look at the sustainability issue. They'll start looking at now, but we don't see any sign of that. They are not looking at sustainability, even Jal Jeevan Mission, rural or urban. So these are the key issues as far as the Jal Jeevan Mission is concerned. So I think we should look at those investment more as an infrastructure issue, and look at, as far as the environment issue is concerned, whether they are looking at these issues. The rest of the budget, I don't see anything positive about the water or the rivers or related thing. See, India's water comes from groundwater. Most of the water we use today comes from groundwater, and the groundwater is in very precarious situation. But you don't find mention of groundwater in any of the volumes of the economic survey or in the budget speech at all. So, and the groundwater has always been the secondary baby as far as the water sector is concerned. Central Water Commission is the elder brother in water sector, and it decides everything. So that continues to be the case. And the final one of the things, only thing other water thing related to water that the finance minister spoke was, she talked about waterways. She just mentioned waterways, but she didn't elaborate what is it that they are going to do. But waterways is having a huge impact on the rivers, adverse impact, and that's happening again without any assessment, any informed decision making, or any participation of the people who are going to be affected by it. And the last thing I would like to say is, you rightly hinted about that what are the kind of investment that's being proposed outside the environment ministry. And if you look at that and the environment footprint of those decisions, you find there are huge, whether it is roads, whether it is urban infrastructure, whether it is water infrastructure, and so on. Now, all of this is going to have a huge environmental footprint. To give you an instance, you said that some places they'll bridge a road for, or some bridge for the wildlife to cross, etc. But that's going to require a lot of sand. Roads are going to require a lot of sand. Now, in sand mining is a major environmental issue in India. So, so there are so many ways urban areas are expanding, their demands are expanding, but their footprint is not looked at all. Even the urban water sector is a huge footprint, increasing footprint, but it's operating in complete policy vacuum. It has no policy to guide it. The national water policy doesn't have much about urban water policy at all. So what we have been talking for long is India urgently needs a national urban water policy, which will then define, we have a smart city program, and they are putting more money into Amrit City and smart cities, but we don't have a water smart city. And without a policy guideline, what will be a water smart city? There is nothing to even guide them, leave aside pushing them into that direction. So I think these are the key issues we need to look at.
Thanks, Himanshu. And I'm sure if you had had time, you would have also elaborated maybe in another session on the whole equity aspects of it. We also know the incredibly iniquitous, unequal distribution of what. Sorry,
and
Himanshu,
one more thing I wanted to add, that they are continuing to add more, push more and more money into hydropower projects. For example, Pakul Dum project in Kashmir, they've allocated more than 600 crores. And similarly, the next expert appraisal committee on River Valley projects meeting is on 5th of February in 2 days. And all 6 projects on the agenda are about hydropower projects in the Himalayan region. And all 6 are by public sector. Private sector is no longer interested in hydropower. They see it's not viable, but the government continues to push hydropower as a clean, green, renewable source of energy, and the public money is being pushed for unviable projects. Now, for example, non-carbon, when they talk, when IMPRI's presentation talked about non-carbon energy sources. I think that's a very wrong way to look at it, because not all non-carbon are environment friendly. I think it's very important to note that. Thank you.
In fact, maybe also one of the panelists can comment on the solar and the renewable energy budget allocations also, because there are obviously clear issues there. Kanchanji, I'll come back to you. Just carrying on a little bit about. Yeah. Okay, great.
I'll come to the solar energy part.
Yes, great. Okay, I'll come to you with that. Just finishing on the water thing, Indira, if you want to add something to what Himanshu said about the water allocations. Yeah.
So I think there's one of the points that you briefly mentioned in your introductory remarks, Ashish, was it's not only the allocation and the expenditure, but also the quality of the expenditure. Namely, where are you putting the money? Where are you spending the money? And once you've spent the money, or once a government has spent the money, is it really reaching the outcomes that it's supposed to achieve? Very often we see that the whole system, infrastructure is there, but not a single drop of water has come out of the whole infrastructure that's created. So I think the quality of expenditure and the outcome is something that needs to be a focus. And a bit Himanshu mentioned about the sustainability of sources. I think I very briefly mentioned that in my first round, but I think the strengthening of the sources, where is the water in this country? I mean, 1/3 of the districts in India are, government has drought relief programs for them. And the other issue is the water quality issue. 70% of our surface water is polluted. Growing number of our groundwater is polluted. You name a pollutant, organic, inorganic, microbial, it's there in the water. We even have uranium in our water in Punjab and in Telangana. So these are huge questions. And you can't always first pollute and then look at technology and then look at, to kind of prevent, to remove these pollutants from water. So clearly there is the need to rethink, look at water in a larger perspective. And if you're spending the money, to also see that the community has the knowledge and the space, the formal space to monitor the kind of expenditures that's happening. If you are going to make multi-village schemes and regional schemes and transfer of bulk water from one place to another, and then say the in-village water supply scheme is going to be operated and managed by the village community, how are they going to manage this? Where are they going to get the funds to manage this? And unfortunately for source sustainability, they say there are 15 governments, different programs, right from NREGA to MP-LAD to MLA-LAD. Udhar se aap sab paisa leke converge karke aap source strengthening karo. It's not easy, that the money comes at the right time and also in the right place, in the right village. So it's something which is a kind of a struggle, and we're already sucking our country dry, groundwater. And unless we start refilling our water banks, we are heading for a bad scene. And it's very unfortunate because we belong in a country where we have so many examples of where people have managed their own water, which is based on the culture, ecological diversity, rural technology, which the people have been using. So this is a kind of a dichotomy which I think we need to address.
And even if you can just give a quick answer to this, even in the rural water missions and so on, was there not much of an emphasis on decentralized water harvesting by the communities themselves?
For drinking water, I think source sustainability became an issue in the last, before this Jal Jeevan mission, in the last couple of years before that. Suddenly, and unfortunately, even organizations and donors which looked at providing drinking water, they only looked at taps and pipelines or deepening of wells. They never really even looked at the whole issue of you need to have, good water resources management. So I think the thinking has come through, but if you're going to be having to look at convert schemes for source strengthening, it's going to be difficult. And a one size fits all for this diverse country is something which is not a recipe for success, I think.
Unfortunately, that's been our bugbear for virtually every sector of the economy for a long time. Kanchanji, you wanted to.
No? We never learn.
Yes, but that's why these sorts of discussions and us raising our voices continues to be important. But anyway, we'll get back to in the last round on what is it that we think we can do to make things a bit more positive. Kanchanji, over to you. You were wanting to speak about the energy thing. Yes.
Yeah, I thought I couldn't agree more on the water issues that have been raised. The only silver lining that I saw there was there is a National Institute for Hydrology which is being thought of for the first time. What does that mean? I leave that as a question.
No, NIH exists for long actually.
It's there in routine.
It's been there for a long time.
It's there in the budget document and some increases there. Anyway,
yeah, but it's been existing for a very long time.
Yeah, maybe in the last round, Indira or Himanshu can tell us about it. But please go on. Yes.
On the energy side, we thought solar energy was the way to go forward. And of course, the funds for the Solar Energy Corporation are there and an increase, and also in IREDA. But then, while solar energy is mentioned, the backup that you need, for instance, manufacture of solar equipment, that is the big challenge, and nothing is being said on that. Then close down of coal plants that are inefficient is not talked about. And in the last budget, there was a talk of closing down old and inefficient thermal plants. Now that again is not picked up again. So the government has this way of picking up one thing and forgetting about it by the time the next budget comes around. So that is the big problem. I thought I'm going to distinguish between the short run and the longer run. In the short run, they could have said in the public transport infrastructure, they could have said that electric vehicles will be incentivized in some manner in the context of public transport, but there is no mention of that. In a budget, I only expect focused points and not a whole policy scenario there. Capital subsidy to promote electric buses could have been there. They could have linked the Jal Jeevan, the urban program, the urban water program with the smart cities program. Smart cities don't have a criteria about restoration of water bodies in cities. If they had talked about restoration of water bodies in cities, a lot of work being done in Bangalore and many other places on that, and then tried to include it as one of the, what would you say, criteria for a smart city. You could have linked the increasing the groundwater table with the urban water, but that was not really thought of. Of course, no one does that kind of thinking on ecological aspects in the context of water supplying water, which has already been pointed out. Then you see, I'll now move to a slightly more medium-term kind of an approach. We wanted to build back better. Since the COVID provides us with the opportunity of investments, how do you build back better and build back greener? That has not been thought of. And even when they have these things, these are all very short run kind of These are things that are they are not thought through. People are not thinking through all that they would like to do, and it is business as usual. Now, would you like? We are not really thinking of how the economy can, how you can align finance with sustainability. That's the other big direction. Can you have green bonds? Can you raise money in financial markets for green
I think
projects?
I
Those
think
are the
Kanchanji,
things that.
in the last round, we'd like you to come up with some of these ideas on the way
Okay,
forward.
so
One,
on the energy issues, I think that was one of those were
okay,
some of the things I thought I will focus on, and that is we are talking of other aspects. I think that's what I'll finish here and come back later again.
okay, great,
Somehow,
thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I think the additional thing, which maybe if you have more time later, you can also mention, is that even with the renewable energy, the non-carbon renewable energy, not hydro, but the other like solar and wind and so on, one of the biggest issues coming up all over India is these mega parks, mega solar park, mega wind park. I just came back from Kutch, and some of the most important ecological habitat in the run and the in the run of Kutch, etc., is being given over to the Adanis for a huge solar park. There's also, of course, major displacement and dispossession of communities that happens. So this whole notion that just because it's solar or wind, therefore it is ecologically sustainable and therefore it is socially fine, is itself something that has simply never been challenged, and none of them are subjected to impact assessment.
That gets it. I'll come back. And that takes us back to the environmental impact assessment.
Okay.
And that is the big problem. You know,
Okay.
we all know the 2020 draft of the EIA.
Okay, good. So yeah, when you have your last next round, I think if you can come into that. Devaditya, what do you think? Do you think there's anything positive in this budget at all, or sort of mainly negative points you want to add to anything that the other panelists have said?
I will just add, like, from ecological point of view. So first of all, like, we have seen the reduction of fund in Project Tiger from like 50 crores every year. So 2 years before it was 50 crores reduction. Now they have further reduced to 50 crores. That is one part. But as I was talking about the institutions, so like, any budget, anything, like, we also need some good institutions to guide. Okay, what should be the best way? So we have seen very, like, significant cutting in the funding of the institutions. And it was done on the behest of Minister of Finance report last year. I think in October they suggested that Wildlife Institute of India and this UPenn Himalayan Institute, Indian Council for Forestry Research Education, and some like 4 or 5 institutes, they said that so it is wastage of like government fund. We can have more efficient use somewhere. And they suggested some 20%, 5% reduction every year in budget. And that also we have seen in this budget also. The funds for these premier like autonomous institutes, like, have been reduced. There has been also, like, and the most important thing is you should also see that, this institutes like Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, Forest Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India, National Green Tribunal. There has been, like, significant reduction in funds for these institutes, which are very much important. They are always in, like, less starving of funds. Because we need, as you know, the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau is a very acting in a very, like, small group of people, inspectors, and it's very important for, especially after COVID. We expected that this monitoring mechanism should be strengthened, but we have seen it has been weakened. And there is one important point. There is called budget under environment knowledge and capacity building, where it has reduced from 86 crores to 70 crores. Now there are two aspects of this environment knowledge and capacity building. There is one forestry training, and there is one eco task force. So forest training is where we provide training to the forest sector personals, like, in state forest divisions. This funding has been reduced. This eco task force is like this scheme is for implementing this like restoration of terrains, or like any environment by Ministry of Defense. So first of all, we know this any project which is under defense, they are exempted from many monitoring. Now we are also reduce the funds for this thing. So these are two, three things which are very negative in my point. But there are two positives which you asked for positives. So though they appear positive, but I have my doubts. So I will tell you why. So one very, like, significant shift from previous budget is that we can see there is a huge like funds for the ocean. So one is this thing called Deep Ocean like mission. I don't know what it is called. In the news article, it says it is for conservation of biodiversity and ocean, whatever. I seriously doubt this much amount for this thing. When I tried to search more about it, then I found that she mentioned that this mission will be including 5-6 government bodies. So you should it's very important to understand this, which bodies will be involved in this mission. If it is for biodiversity, one is Ministry of Earth Science, one is ISRO, the Space Research Organization, one is Defense Development and Research Organization, DRDO, one is Department of Atomic Energy, one is CSIR, Council for Scientific Industrial Research, one is DBT, Department of Biotechnology, and Indian Navy. Now these 5-6 organizations, which are heavily known for defense and all these things, how can you expect that this money is going for conservation of biodiversity? It is more, I think it is more about exploring of resources in the deep ocean. So we should not be disillusioned by this kind of things. These are especially, we have seen what they have done in Ganga. Okay, when they came to the government, they say we'll preserve Ganga. Now they have made waterways in the entire river basins of India. Okay, so we should not be disillusioned, because on the news articles everywhere I have seen the people are saying that they have this thing. There is slightly increase in the National Coastal Mission, which again media say that this is more about like survival of fisher folks and all these things. Again, it is a dissolution. You should more into more detail about what this mission does. But it is more about like building infrastructures, like creating burns or anything like that. It is not a environment friendly this thing. Secondly, one thing very interesting which people might be disagreeing with me, but I have my strong reservations, because there's 18,000 crores which are reserved for expansion of metro rail network and augmentation of city bus. Now, this sounds very good, but it also comes with a caveat that it will be targeted to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Now, for bus, I may say that okay, bus is fine. People use bus. But metro, in tier 2 cities, we have seen examples in Lucknow, Varanasi, like they are bringing metro, but it's not needed. It is a wastage of money, public money. It is more like fashion of like you own an iPhone, so I have a metro in my city. People are very and this all is like system of giving contracts to different people. So we should not be disillusioned by this is going to help. And we have seen in example of Delhi also, this metro is not affordable for common man. Okay, and the last mile connectivity, all these things are very very granular issue, and we have to work towards that. And they also talk about PPP models. Now, when you solve PPP, public-private mode, it is either big corporates. Okay, it's not going to help you local people. So God knows this 111 cities, they have said 20,000 buses. They will run PPP model, tier 2, tier 3. So we have to see whether it is going to help the common man or it is going to help the local politicians and local contractors. This is one thing. So I think, yeah, this is, and the rest, I think much covered about the water part. So I will conclude here.
Thanks a lot. You added a lot of very critical new points. So we're going to get into the last round now, where my question is, and you can interpret it the way you want. If you were finance minister, what are the 1 or 2 key things you would do to make the budget ecologically much more sensitive? So let's reverse it. Devaditya, can you carry on talking and give us a response to this?
So I already talk about the problems, so I will start from that only, how to address those. So we have to strengthen our who are the forefront of the implementation. When we talk about all these things, until unless we are able to safeguard our assets means the natural assets. We know because of our pandemic, we have to increase the economic, we'll see more industries coming, we will see more this kind of destruction environment. So we should have invested more on strengthening this ground monitoring, improving the capacity of the state pollution control board, or having more officers of pollution control board in every district, something like that. We should have seen more funding to this wildlife crime control bureau and the forest divisions, all these places, which are very important for tackling these problems. We could have seen more projects on restoration of wetlands, okay, conserving glaciers, conserving of floodplains, this kind of things. Then there was a suggestion by people when I talk with many river activists, they say like states like Uttarakhand, they take dams. It is a very political issue because states need funds, and dams and tourism are the 2 main economic things. If the state can, if this kind of states can get some grant from center, that this is amount which we are giving you to conserve the resources, because we are taking benefits from you. Like Delhi is getting water from Uttarakhand. So we should help you conserve the resources, but we will also compensate you. This kind of things will be, they'll be more people friendly, and they will have more long-term impact. But the more on infrastructure, it is really not working. So my suggestion is that only we should have more investment on the natural assets and the already existing systems to conserve them, protect them from different kind of things. So yeah.
Thank you. I think one of the things you raised very important, maybe Kanchanji later can come into this, is there's been a lot of talk about payment of the incredible ecosystem services that are provided across the Himalayan range by states that are conserving or trying to conserve their forests and their catchments and so on, to the states down in the plains. And is there some way by which, in fact, that kind of compensation or payment can be paid? Is that something that's viable? It's never come in any budgets, but there has been discussion on it. But let's go to Indira. Suddenly a finance minister, what would you do?
What I would do, before I go that, I just want to make one point on the fecal sludge management budget that's there. There's a big budget for fecal sludge management for urban areas. It's 1.41 lakh crore spread over 5 years. I'm just hoping the policy for this is one which maybe will look for decentralized waste sewage treatment models rather than the large infrastructure models, because they require tremendous capital and then again O&M, tremendous amount of O&M, and very often the local bodies don't have the capacity to deal with that. Coming to, if I were finance minister, I think I would straight away start working to see how I can bring economists who are expert in doing the analysis of the budget and people who are working on the ground, community which is working on the ground, working on regenerating the ecology, to bring them both together and try to actually get a true value. If a certain intervention is being proposed, say, for example, coal mining or a dam or any such big program, how is it actually, what is the actual cost if we take into the cost of the natural resources? One of the participants has mentioned that we need regenerative economy to rejuvenate the economy. I think that's a very good statement. I think that's something that I would like to work towards. There is a Suparna Divakar who said regenerative economics to rejuvenate the economy. I think to rejuvenate nature and is something that I would see how we can bring clusters. I mean, Kanchanji, I know, is one person, but we need to bring both of these sectors together so that we can actually come at the true cost of what a certain intervention is going to be. And do we really need that kind of intervention? Or how can we avoid making that big intervention? Because it's not going to be sustainable. We cannot do unending development in a finite natural system. I think that's something we need to understand and work.
Thank you. And I think in your mix of
work against.
Sorry. Thanks, Indira. And I think in your mix of people to bring together local communities, economists, I would say women's groups, Dalit groups, because there's lots of equity issues and injustice issues involved in this whole scenario. So it would have to be, I guess, a mix of different kinds of interest groups, especially those who are most marginalized. And in some way, I'm sure Devadatta would champion this in some way to bring wildlife also onto the table. I don't know how, but people who can speak on behalf of the other species which normally get neglected in any such human endeavor. Himanshu, Finance Minister.
Yeah, thank you. I wish I had, if I was a finance minister, I would also have time to prepare for the budget. That preparation of the budget is very important. And one of the process I would like to do, that I would possibly ask each unit of economy, starting from, say, village to district to state to the nation, asking them that what are the 3 things you want to get done in the next budget, and sector wise, in different sectors, what are your priorities? So those kind of inputs, which will also include inputs for processes of, for the ministries to follow, because the finance ministry is not supposed to look at the processes and policies, but at least it will provide inputs for other. So that's one thing I would really like to, as a input to this thing, and that should provide a major input to the budget making. The second thing is that what is required is that each department should, the budget is also about quantification of the money spent and impact created. So one of the things I would have liked to do is that ask every unit again of the economy to, have a methodology to assess the footprint, ecological footprint of their work, whether it is, say, environment ministry or fertilizer ministry or mining ministry and so on, and ask them to also prepare, come out with those indexes. And that should be part of the budget, that what is the ecological impact of this budget. So that should be another thing. And that should also be true for each city, and each city sub-sectors, like say transport sector or energy sector or water sector or and so on. So, that kind of input can be really helpful in assessing what is the way forward, both in terms of the environment and climate change context. And lastly, there should also be, not possibly part of the budget, but also be that each individual should also have a way of assessing the ecological footprint of their lifestyle and their consumption. And that should make possibly people more conscious of what they are consuming and how they can reduce that footprint. Thank you.
Thanks, Himanshu. 3 great points. And you included both substance and process in those. So that's fantastic. Kanchanji, you have the last word on this question.
Thank
You are now finance minister.
Well, I would, there are several things that come to mind. And I think Himanshu put it very well. Look at the ecological footprint of everything else that's happening in the economy. And that is a big task, because the budget is only a balancing of income and expenditure. It has to be embedded in the larger policy, environmental policy. So in the longer run, I would like to tell, as a finance minister, I would look at the environmental policy and try to link and try ways in which environmental policy can be linked with the budget. So in that context, this government, there is a kind of convergence in this budget, because the budget doesn't have much on the environment, because economic policy as it stands today does not have doesn't really bring the environment into the picture. Our investments are not looking at the ecological impact and the environmental impact. Whatever we do is driven by international compulsions, the solar energy thing, the NDCs, the national contributions, the decline in the energy intensity of GDP, all these are driven by international compulsions. As far as internally we are concerned, we have no concern for R&D, and the decrease in the expenditure on institutions which Devaditya Sinha talked about has all to do with, we don't really worry about R&D into the environmental sector, and that is it gets reflected in the budget. And most importantly, when we say that solar parks will come in Kutch and we don't know the environmental impact of these things, the environmental impact assessment that has been in place since 2006 and earlier 1994 we started, it has all been, in a manner of speaking, partially disrupted by the draft of the EIA in 2020. So little wonder that the budget is not really going to be a panacea for everything. Many projects have been taken out of the purview of environmental impact assessment, and that is where we have to focus on. I see that most of the panelists move quickly, and rightly so, from the budget to other things that are wrong with our policy, because, and that is my major point here, resilient infrastructure. We have huge expenditures on infrastructure, but if the roads go through the national parks or ecologically sensitive areas, we cannot do much, we cannot go a long way. We have to look at our natural capital as a part of the capital in this country, and that is the way to go forward. And if we do not keep that natural capital, at least keep it constant, we are going to decrease human well-being. That is what we need to realize. As for ecosystem services provided by some states to others, that is the purview of the Finance Commission. Right from the 13th Finance Commission, suggestions were made, recommendations were made that states that have a larger forest cover should get an extra part of the kitty that you have with the Finance Commission. And that was a very small beginning, but now this is a part of the criteria on the basis of which funds are distributed between the center and the states. And of course, I think I'll stop here. I think I've made my point. Budgets can't do everything. The budgets only reflect the government's thinking.
Thank you, Kanchanji. And actually,
So
on that
as
last point,
finance,
sorry.
no, that's all. That's all. I
Okay.
think that's all.
Thanks. And I think on that last point, if I might just add, just amplifying some of what you people have said. One is that, the budget is a one-year budget, and we need to be looking at a much more long-term planning horizon. At least earlier, we had a 5-year plan kind of process. There was a one whole year in which the plan, the 5-year plan was being made. Not that it was perfect, not that it was fully participatory. There were lots of problems with it, but at least there was some opportunity there. Now you have this annual cycle where there's really no, like Himanshu said, as finance minister, he would want more time to even be able to have a budget that kind of tries to put all these things together. And the second point, I think, which is underlying a lot of this is the continuing growth fetish that all countries have, including India. We just want growth at any cost, 3%, 5%, 10%, if possible, the highest growth rates in the world, not looking at the fact that we do have a finite ecosystem, ecological resources. I think 10 years back, already there was a report by strangely enough, the Confederation of Indian Industries, along with the Ecological Footprint Network, which showed that we were already 1.5 times over our natural resource capacities. And we were obviously very unsustainable. That's 10 years back. So now the situation must be even much worse. But none of this seems to be in the horizon of the government, certainly not in the budgets. Simi and Indira, you'd be helping me with, Ambika, sorry, you'd be helping me with the questions. I can see in the Q&A there's lots, so I haven't been able to keep track of them. So please help.
Simi, your voice is not coming. No. No.
Okay, I'm looking at them meanwhile.
Yes.
Some of these are comments that kind of basically amplify what the panelists have already spoken, so I won't ask them as questions. Well, climate has not been mentioned much today, but so maybe one of the questions, if any of you wants to address this, is why is the climate emergency not seen as real? We are beyond the climate crisis and climate change, but even these terms don't find center stage in policy, and it's probably missing completely from the finance minister's speech. I don't know. I haven't seen the speech. Any of you like to address this?
I could.
So one of the things I would like to highlight is if you read through the economic survey, it talks about for example, disaster, increasing disasters, and it mentions Kerala disaster. And the sentence it says, I mean, it's very shocking. It says that in the August 2018 flood disaster, 80 dams were destroyed in Kerala. This is the sentence in the economic survey. The fact is, none of the dams were destroyed actually. So I mean, even where they are mentioning climate change, they're very inaccurate and clumsy and not careless, I guess, and not really very particular. I thought that was very striking. the way they, I mean, 80 dams were destroyed is such a shocking statement in the economic survey. Imagine.
Kanchanji, you wanted to add something on that, on climate?
I just thought that on climate, we are being driven by whatever the international requirements are. We did sign the Paris Accord, and then we have said that we will produce a certain percentage of our energy, I think 40% by 2030 from renewable sources. But we have not, for instance, followed up by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. So we say something, but the follow-up processes do not come through. So we've said that the carbon emissions intensity of GDP will go down by some percentage by 2030. But are we taking steps in that direction? And those are the things that would come through in the context of climate. Now, if you move to the agricultural sector, then you have other issues like the increasing disasters, the increase in the frequency of cyclones and so on, and their impact on agriculture. That's a whole lot of things there. Budgets can only tell you, they could have said eliminate fossil fuel subsidies or something to reduce carbon emissions, but they have to be embedded in the larger policy. That's all that I won't repeat myself there. Same is true for climate policy.
Sure, yes, thanks.
Ashish sir, if you suggest, we can, because sir, I think more than 50 questions. Some questions Simi has also collected, and also Ambika ma'am. They can sir read it out. Then sir, you can assign to speakers as you see.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Who will go first? Ambika ma'am, you or Simi?
I'm just gonna put forth two questions. One, a couple of people have asked about the importance of creating databases. And I think that's something to touch upon it. I don't know if that's a budget issue, but it's important given the context of the discussion and why we need to improve our data management, collection and management in India. And the other question is talking about, sorry, I just had it here. Yeah, how do we balance out the need for our infrastructure development and growth with our environmental concerns? I mean, I think we know the challenges, but how do we balance this out going forward, and how can the budget help in that balance?
Okay, I'm going to address the first question to Devaditya, because I think you were also talking about the weakening of institutions, many of which are also data collection, data management, data generation kind of institution, not just data, but information and knowledge. So Devaditya, do you want to address that question?
Sure. So it's a question of budget, because we know that government have all the data, all the industries, they have data.
Devaditya, your voice is muffled. Which
can you hear me now?
Better.
Yeah. So I don't think it is a issue of budget, is more of a political will, because all these pollution control board, either the state or center, they have live data of all the industries coming to the chambers. I have seen myself in the CPCB chairman's office where he has seen, but they don't want this data to be available to public. Okay, because we know, like, if they make it public, then there will be flooding of litigations in the court, and they don't want to, and if this thing happen in a very transparent way, then I think it is difficult for the industries to achieve those standards, even though they are weak. So I think this is a clearly lack of political will than lack of financial thing, because it is more because if you search on Google also, you can see the links are there. The links are restricted. Only the officials or the company can access by logging in. So yeah, and the law also says that they have to make it public, but they are not making it. So we know the reasons why they're not making it.
But also the erosion of even the institutions that would be generating and collecting and putting the information.
Yes. That is
Like
a-
you mentioned, the
Yeah.
zoological
this-
survey, the botanical survey, I mean, these were all important institutions, at least to generate the information.
Yeah, even the MOF is also very important because right now like there are regional offices of MOF in 2-3 states, or I think there are 10 regional offices, and each offices had hardly 1 or 2 scientific officers. Okay, now there are thousands of industries in a state. If you take 3 states, now so is it humanly possible for them to go and take surprise checking? And from a like Dehradun, the regional office in Dehradun, they cover 3 states. They have to go to Himachal Pradesh as well. So it is a very practical problem. And over that, we have reduced the funding of MOF. And I don't know, because the estimate given by MOF is less than what they have approved. So this is I think this is a problem. Yeah, of course, this is a budgetary problem, but also more than that is a political will.
Right.
So if there is a will, I don't think there's a problem of appointing more officers.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just,
The
Ashish,
infrastructure and
can
Sorry.
I just augment what he said with the experience from drinking water?
Please.
See, earlier when the MDWS, Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, was there, on their website, anybody could get access of quarterly coverage, quarterly budget, that came in, and the budget that was utilized. You're not talking about the outcome, but you knew that what was the money that came in, what was the coverage that the government claimed, whether it was right or no was different. Even budget line wise, you could find that. That information now is no longer available. Just yesterday, I was speaking to a college principal from Maharashtra who was, along with students, is doing water quality testing in rivers. And she went to a government lab and they said, Madam, aapko sahi result bataye, you tell us what result you want. In certain places, he said, Madam, ye to bahut hi zyada hai over the permissible level. Sachi mein aapko ye result chahiye kya? So this whole issue of transparency and accountability is, I think, something which is missing, even if the data must be in the public domain. So that's also very, very important. Not being used for, for keeping tabs on us and for marketing, but really for bringing about positive change.
Right. Thank you. On the infrastructure one, which is, of course, quite a complex question. Himanshu, do you want to respond to that? And maybe Kanchanji later.
Yeah, about the water, I think just want to add the water data. The Mihir Shah committee has talked about the restructuring of the Central Water Commission. One of the big key aspect was the data. The water data that we have is not reliable at all. We all know. In fact, they're not in public domain, but whatever is there, it's also not reliable. So the Mihir Shah committee has suggested complete restructuring of CWC, Central Groundwater Board, etc. And so, I was part of a committee of Ministry of Water Resources on Ganga siltation data. And the Central Water Commission, which measures the siltation, said we have no data from the various tributary, how much silt enters the Ganga and how much is collected at Farakka. They had no data about it. So, just shows that how poor is our data gathering process on crucial issues like rivers and water.
Thanks. Yes. Can I also suggest to speakers, if any of you can look at the Q&A, you can also maybe respond to some of them just by putting it into the thing, so that, because we won't have time to address all of these questions.
Some of the questions he has also collected, sir.
Yes,
some of the questions.
So in the meantime, panelists, please feel free to read the questions, but I have also collated some. Actually, the Ministry of Environment, because it is very dynamic, it is actually having its bearing, the whole environment thing is having its bearing on several other ministries as well: Jal Shakti, Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Ministry of Road Transformation, Transportation, Ministry of Water, etc., etc. So while some individual schemes have been announced, with increased budgetary allocations, their immediate implications, which could have had, which is actually there in this Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, to ensure a clean, green and resilient environment, it remains in the lurch. So actually, sadly, there is a lot, environment has been reduced to a blotting paper to have, or to soak all the filth of other ministries. So there is also a complete ignorance of the whole terminology has been missing. Climate change is missing. In fact, incidentally,
Simi, is there a question there? So these are all comments. The comments can
yes.
be read. Is there a question that the panelists need to address? Can you get to that?
The question is that how do we change the policy ignorance and draw attention towards the rapidly degrading environment and effects of the climate change in our own country and region? And what is the way forward? Would this help in divesting from fossil fuels? Or would 470 crore rupees for cleaning the air for in 122 cities be enough? If the panelists can throw light on this, and we can come back again.
I think quite clear from the panelists that it's not going to be enough. And this issue of what can we do to change the whole mindset, etc., is like a massive thing. We can have a few dozen webinars on this. I don't know, is there any sort of single sentence response any of the panelists wants to give to this? I mean, it's like this huge.
So I will just tell you one thing. In Delhi, what I have seen, they have wasted money on for this big like guns, mist guns, and watering the entire city. It is more of optics, so I don't think there's any best use of that money for addressing pollution. It is more of being eyewash.
Yeah, right.
But the allocation for the air pollution control has come down to half from the previous budget.
And that's in a National Clean Air Action Plan, which itself is pretty faulty.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Delhi is also missing from the list, I think.
No,
What is missing?
On the infrastructure and our requirements with respect to ecological aspects of infrastructure development can be looked at. To begin with, we should respect our no-go areas. If roads have not to be constructed somewhere, the extra cost of deviating that can be treated as a part of our investment in the environment and in the ecologically sensitive areas. One could talk at length on this, but I think this is much beyond the budget as such. It goes into the whole area of environment and development. So I'll stop here.
Yeah. Ashish sir, there was also many questions regarding China and some international comparisons also. So I think if that also we incorporate and something related to the national infrastructure pipeline, many infrastructure thing also coming. So what is the data do we have, as Himanshu sir was also saying, that EIA and other things, that data also we don't have. What is the greening dimension of all the infrastructure project? So if panelists can also touch upon what has been the experience of China or other comparative country and how we should look forward or any best practices.
With regard to infrastructure, you're saying?
With also regard to the environment budget and the direction we are going in as a country compared to other countries.
Okay, I can say a few things about China, but any of the panelists wants to respond to this? Do we, in comparison to say China or other countries, how do we fare or what can we do better, including on infrastructure?
At least from my limited knowledge about China is that they have not performed very well vis-a-vis environment and the big development projects that they have. And one of the biggest disaster that happened there was when they wanted to kill, they killed all the mice because they felt that when the mice was eating the crop, it was a loss, economic loss, and that resulted in a huge famine in China. So I don't think that's a country we can look forward to because China also believes big is better. And I think we should be going for like decentralized, small kind of development. And I think that while I recognize that how much development is enough, I think if the government were to shift its policy direction and the statement that it makes that there are limits to growth in a finite ecological system. And I think if that's the kind of line that they try to promote through their various campaigns, then they develop their policies, their programs and budgets accordingly. I think that should bring about a shift. Even the Three Gorges Dam in China has had huge environment implications. It's changed the monsoon pattern. Drought areas have become flooded areas and vice versa. So I think positive examples we need to look elsewhere.
And in any case, that begs the question, if the government were to change its mindset, the question is, how does one get the government to change the mindset, especially a government of this kind, which is hell-bent on one particular model of development and is very much in the hands of the private corporate sector, which basically is only looking for profits. I don't personally see much of a way of changing the mindset of this government, except for mass people's movements, which fortunately
Yes.
are growing on the ground. Kanchanji, you wanted to add something on the infrastructure or on China?
No, not really. Not on China. I haven't been looking at China.
Okay.
And on infrastructure, I've already said that we need to look for win-win situations where we can have the roads, we can have the switch over to electrical vehicles may be there will be a cost attached to that, but we have to look at that as the cost of working within the safe operating space which is available to humanity. That's about all. There can be a lot said on what happened to earlier committees, earlier recommendations on these issues, but I won't get into that.
Thanks. Maybe I can just quickly mention on China, one of the biggest issues is of late, there's a lot of environmental talk, even from in the highest decision-making sections of China, the party. And so people are saying, oh, they've kind of, woken up to it. But actually, if you look at Chinese, not just within the country, but even more so outside the country, the impacts of Chinese investments in Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia are horrendous. Some of the biggest mining, some of the biggest, right now, for instance, road and railway going all straight across the Amazon is being proposed. There's all kinds of different things. Most of the big companies that are now actually providing things for our cell phones, for instance, many of them are Chinese, and they're doing very destructive mining in Central Africa and many other parts of the world. But this also does relate to the third point Himanshu made, which is our own consumption patterns. How many of us actually use a cell phone for its full life, or basically discard it because a new model has come and say, oh my God, we must get the iPhone 6 or 8 or whatever it is. And many other, I'm just giving that as one example. There are many other examples. Of course, these are not things that can come into the budget necessarily, though it could. For instance, much more incentives for ecologically friendly lifestyles could definitely be a budget issue, but it almost never has been. Arjun, Simi, any other pressing questions where I'm conscious of the time?
Yes.
There is one also from Zinat ma'am. She has been asking about Narega and what can be done in the rural sector. I think Simi, yes.
That's a good question. Narega, who would like to address that?
I can. Okay, Himanshu wants to go.
Indira, go ahead, then Himanshu can add.
Yeah, just a couple of things. That one is that allocation has come down hugely compared to what was the expenditure last year. Secondly, I think, as Indira said very correctly, there needs a predictability about how much money is available and when it is available and where it is available, and a very clearly defined focus on what this money should be spent on. And that's really required, and that can really help in a big way. So just quick answer. Yeah.
Thanks. Indira, any want to add something?
Yeah, Narega funds have been effectively used for creating natural assets in rural areas. And if there are certain organizations or civil society people who can work along with the community, some places that helps. I know that after this COVID, when the lockdown happened and a lot of migrants went back, double distressed migrants in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, Bundelkhand area, and in Nandurbar in Maharashtra, there were people who kind of access this Narega money and the money from the forest department to do afforestation, dig trenches, so that distress, in the hope that, once you have these structures and forests in place, hopefully over time, these people would need not migrate again to urban areas. So yes, there are very good examples where it has natural assets, but then again, it takes time. It's not that just one time you've got dug a thing and then it's done. It takes time and consistent effort and resources.
Sure. There's also been a demand for an urban Narega. I don't know whether this budget has it or not, but there's a lot that can be done through NREGS in the urban sector also, including on environmental issues. But that hasn't yet come into the focus so far as I know.
Simi, would you like to add
anything else which? And with a lot of apologies to many, I don't know, there must be more than a dozen questions we haven't been able to address.
Many.
But there is a request also for the email IDs of the panelists, whoever from the panelists would like to give it, so that the audience can continue the discussion with them directly on email or phone, if they so desire.
Yes, sir, let us collect last few questions, then we can move to the way forward. We are good on time. Simi, yes.
Well, you know, at the international level, it's mentioned that we are very eloquently mentioning all our targets, all the, you know, in terms of COP meetings, etc. We will be attaining all our targets before time, but nothing has been mentioned in our budget, especially in terms of climate change adaptation and mitigation. So, what do you think? There is the problem of climate refugees as well. If any of you could take up this question, how do we deal with this entire challenge of climate environmental refugees?
Okay, good question.
Could I attempt a bit
Yes,
on
yes,
this answer? I think one of the major impact of climate change is going to be on water resources. I think that we've already seen, and we've mentioned already, the increased incidence of natural disasters, cyclones and floods and drought, etc. And also the impact on agriculture. I think that what we call as environment refugees is very unfortunate because, you know, we have taken the water from rural areas for our needs. They have become, you know, they become waterless in a sense. And because of that, they are forced to migrate to urban areas in a distressed condition. So if we focus, I think, invest a lot on locally community-driven water resource conservation, using the local, you know, the local people that are there, the local technologies, the topography, which I mentioned earlier, and try and build up our water banks, try and build up our surface water bodies and our groundwater banks. I think then that's, in a way, it may be possible to reduce this distress migration and what we call as climate refugees, because being waterless is clearly one reason why you know, why this refugee situation is happening, not only in India, but also elsewhere in the world. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
I will just want to add one thing to this.
Yeah, please.
So apart from climate, we should also be concerned about the extreme weather events. Okay, so now India is ranking 5th at the, like, you know, at the most like extreme weather risk countries. And we have seen like around 350 around climate, this extreme weather events within, I think, last 5 or 6 years from there. This is like double than what we have seen in last 20 years, something like this. And now 75% of districts of India are under, like, you know, extreme weather events, like, you know, this thing. So we are seeing extreme rainfall. Some places which have never seen drought, they are having rainfall. Places where used to be rain, now they are seeing droughts. And this phenomena is getting very frequently. So for that, we have this a national action plan for, I think, I don't remember the name. In that plan, we also should have a state level action plan. And unfortunately, like after 2009 or 19, I don't know what, we are secretary of Sendai framework, which is not much talked about, but there are some targets we have to reach by 2030. And now we have seen, like, every year, like, this number is getting increased. So unfortunately, like, neither not the budget nor any policy or any law is focusing anything on the extreme weather events. Now we are focusing entirely on the, like, coast and erosion, all this thing. But this is very important because the entire central India belt, they have seen more such, you know, huge rainfalls within 2-3 days. This is having impact on the agriculture. It is having on food security, on more diseases, on everything. So even the dams, they have developing on this thing, they are also not viable just because of the extreme weather events. So, you know, this kind of things are not considered in the budget or any place in the policy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. Sir, one question also, Ashish sir, yes. I also wanted to ask you, because Ashish sir also gave one very nice lecture on rainbow recovery. Now, we all know that we are in this pandemic situation and our budget is focusing on CapEx and more on infrastructure, and the data related things also coming. I also wanted to
Arjun, you froze. I think his camera is frozen. Anyway, maybe he'll come back. Kanchanji just a message saying she has to leave in 5 minutes. Kanchanji, any last words from you?
Not really. I've enjoyed being on this panel. I could only reiterate that all the institutions we have in place for environmental assessment and ecological footprint planning and looking at must be in place, and then alone can we expect our economic policies to be in line with and in line with good maintaining the natural capital and trying to improve human well-being. Budgets can do something, but not everything. And we are unfortunately moving in the wrong direction here. We are moving away from whatever the earlier environmental assessments and ecological footprint measurements. All these have to go on more so in the context of consumption patterns. I think that's an area which we have not attempted nationally in the communities and at individual levels. I think we must also look at, Ashish has done that, of course, consumption patterns, especially of the richer people in India, and that includes a large number of us. So anyway, I'll stop at that. Thank you for having me. Thanks to IMPRI for asking me to join this panel. Unfortunately, I just have to leave now. So I'll take your leave, Ashish.
Thank you, Kanchanji. Thanks for joining. And yeah,
Thank
we'll be in
you.
touch to pick your brains more on some of these aspects.
Yeah,
So
we'll
much, ma'am.
be in touch. Thanks to
Thank you.
IMPRI
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
having me. Thanks to IMPRI for having me.
Simi, anything?
Yes, so
while we
actually
wait for
Arjun
Arjun?
has texted about what was he actually asking? He was asking about the role of consultants and MNC's project management units. If would this approach help in any which ways? And also, I would like to add that conventional agriculture really has its implications on greenhouse gases. It is actually the third largest emitter in our country. Where do you see the role of urban agriculture, especially aquaponics and hydroponics? It would also help in at least catching some of the foul air pollution in the urban centers.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood the first question. The role of consultancies from multinational corporations, was that the questions?
Texted, I'll just confirm.
Maybe just clarify the question. On the second one on urban agriculture, does any of you want to respond? Himanshu, Indira, Devaditya?
I would not like to. I'm not adequately informed.
Okay, so if none of you, then I can give a very brief response to this, which is that I think there is tremendous scope for urban agriculture, rooftop, backyard, commons, the recommoning of private spaces and creating agricultural plots in them, including many parking lots and so on, which should be, I think cars should just be removed from there and they should be converted into farming or gardening plots. This is happening in many parts of Europe, for instance. And that could certainly help with some kind of capturing of bad air and so on. But I think that would probably be a very small contribution. I think way more important in this is the fact that it provides urban communities with fresh food from their own backyards or their rooftops. It reduces some of the sort of long distance food travel that has to happen, which has its own ecological footprint. It creates a psychological satisfaction for a lot of urban communities because people actually do want to work with their hands, but they get no opportunities to do that. And many other things. There's a lot of work on urban agriculture that is happening now in many parts of the world, including some parts of India. Bangalore, for instance, has 30,000 families that do rooftop gardening. Pune also has a lot. So this is certainly an area with a lot of potential, with multiple different benefits that could come out of it. Did you get a clarification on the consultancy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Arjun is here.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
sorry.
Arjun, you're back. Yeah.
Got the system. Yes, I was asking that also to Himanshu sir, also in your experience, because for most of these things are also technical, be it hydro, be it water, be it air. So we are also creating a lot of new institutions. Many of them are also SPVs. Also, that also spread over many regions, also many authorities. Also, we have land is of someone else. So we are creating this special purpose vehicles time and again for different uses, some judicial bodies, some execution bodies, some technical. And in this process, since we also have to spend this budget and all the things, many consultants have also came in as project monitoring unit, project monitoring consultant. They devise the plan, spending everything. In fact, most of the reports are made by them. And not only in fact for water, for sanitation, for housing, others also the data is not being out now what has been earlier, 2 years earlier. I have written many paper in EPW and many data thing also we see. Now that is also being curtailed. So, sir, how do we see now our implementation and this planning paradigm looking into this new role of our also human resources or manpower or institution to have this kind of decentralized or rainbow recovery in this pandemic? How we can streamline also the sustainable development concept? And I'll reiterate this question again, because India time and again the issue of skill comes in for most of the things. So we try to hire more specialized, and as the time passes, the business as usual scenario remains. The challenges becomes more and more, bigger, as we see also in the case of air pollution.
Arjun, you'll have to make it shorter. You're
So that was my only thing, that how in reality are we seeing the implementation side. Time and again we are saying civil societies should come in and do this and everything, but really the situation remains as it is, business as usual. Or as I would say that Indra ma'am really made a very pertinent point at the start only, business full stop.
Right. Himanshu, I think specifically you were pointed to. I'll also make some remarks on this, but Himanshu, please go ahead.
So, so consultants are doing EIAs, for example, or cumulative impact assessments and management plans, and some places they are also involved in monitoring, etc. The governance happens through committees and experts. What is required, in fact, is that what is the governance of this reports that is happening. So today we don't have a credible governance of the impact assessment reports, for example. There is the appraisal committee, which has no independent members. We know, for example, we look at the River Valley projects EIAs, and I have been challenging. You show me one honest EIA, just one. It doesn't exist. Every one of the EIAs for River Valley projects is a doctored document. It's a dishonest document. But none of the EIAs has ever been rejected by the EACs. In the public hearing, again, the people say that this is the problem with this EIA. Nothing happens to that. So the public hearing, the appraisals, the appraisal committees, and then if you go to the legal aspect, you go to NGT or Supreme Court, there's not a single example. I think there's one or two maybe, where the judiciary has said that this is totally, it's everyone knows EIAs are doctored. And they go to, there are several cases that go to them. Even judiciary has not really given a great verdict on this issue. So, what happens is that we may, in the short run, we may not be able to keep out the consultancies. But the point is we need to strengthen, have a much more credible governance of this decision-making process. And in that, what is also important is that definition of what should constitute an EIA. For example, it should be if you look at the hydropower or water project, it should start with the planning process. What are the society's priorities? And then how does that project fits into their priorities? What are the options and how this is the best option? So, option assessment, planning process, prioritization of the needs. So all of this has to be the metrics under which this kind of reports has to be made and has to be appraised. None of this is happening, unfortunately.
And the involvement of the affected communities, of course.
That's public hearing, I said. Yeah, it should be there.
But
Yeah.
beyond public hearing, no, Himanshu?
Absolutely. Yeah, it should be every stage of the project. Absolutely.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the other thing is that, this is not just an environment. In every sector, we have got so dependent on these so-called experts and consultants that the knowledge of the public, and each one of us as a knowledge generator and as a decision maker, we've just given up that prerogative, that inherent power in us, and said, no, okay, it's the consultants or it's the experts or it's these people who will actually take all the decisions for us. And we know that that's often or usually, in fact, a disaster. Where we see successful examples, such as the water work that Indira and others are involved with, or I've seen in Kutch, for instance, the country's lowest rainfall, but villages have become completely self-reliant with decentralized water harvesting, where local traditional water knowledge, along with the hydrological knowledge of some, formally trained hydrologists, putting these together and creating a whole group of geohydrologists from the youth in these villages. They've gone village to village and solved the problems of the water. You don't need fancy consultants and big water institutions to do this. And this would be the case for virtually every basic need that we have. We're not talking about highly sophisticated going to the moon and building a rocket, but basic needs that we have is eminently possible through this kind of an approach. But then it's an approach that doesn't allow some people, some sitting in New Delhi, etc., to make lots of money and to retain power. That's also at the crux of why we have this kind of decision making. Simi, Arjun, otherwise I want to give one last 1 minute to each of the panelists as a last round.
To the last
yes,
one.
sir, I think, yes, we can go to the way forward round. Yes.
Okay, way forward, we already did. I just want to see any sort of last words,
Yes, completely comments.
Okay, so Indira, start with you.
Yeah, I think what really enjoyed this discussion and what really came out is that we need to look at budgets beyond just the money. I think this was articulated by several of us. And I think moving forward, what you mentioned, Ashish, I think one way to bring about change, and which we have been doing and which we will need even more now to do, is build up people's movements and see that people start raising their voice and asking questions. I think that's the way forward. And whatever budget we have, at best, what we can do is see it's been at least achieving some of its outcome that it's supposed to. When I'm talking about social sectors, say like drinking water and sanitation and other such sectors, for example. So yeah,
Thank
those
you.
are the last minute thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Indira. Devaditya?
Yeah, so I will just say that, we have to move beyond this model of GDP, because I think the main problem of all the problem, whether budget or policy or law, everything, it comes down to this model we follow of like production-based model, okay, where we ignore the environmental social cost. It doesn't appear in the entire thing. And secondly, I think we should also include this like strategic impact assessment of any plans or budget. This is the way forward, because I think this is the only way to make our policy or budget or any law eco-friendly. So that's how. Thank you.
Thanks. In fact, the strategic environmental assessment was also something Himanshu had highlighted, looking at whole sectors and their ecological impact.
Absolutely.
Himanshu, last words.
Yeah, just two things. I think IMPRI has done good thing, as Ashish said in the beginning, that to have this discussion. But I would suggest to IMPRI the two things. One is that they should look at the bigger picture and draw a bigger picture. Say in last 6-7 years of this government, how has the environment sector been dealt with, and how it is changing over the years, and how different aspects. So even budgetary aspect and otherwise. And secondly, such an exercise should also happen before the budget and push certain advocacy that what the finance minister must look at. So, and then possibly again after that. Yeah, two things. Yeah.
That's a good idea. And I think one could also work with groups like Madhyam and others to try and address some of these questions also to members of parliament.
Yeah.
Because even, whether you're in the government or in opposition, ecological issues tend to get short shrift. Most of the members of parliament, and one is not blaming them, that's the way we've all been kind of brought up, are either ignorant or, I would say actually illiterate about ecological issues. There are some that do raise these issues, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to be on panels like this and to maybe create forums which IMPRI can try and facilitate forums by which we can also be talking to members of parliament, members, MLAs, and others, of course, who are influential in policy making. So I am in no way going to attempt to summarize this very rich and complex discussion. Just to end by saying that I think the budget is a kind of a microcosm of a much larger picture of how we as human beings in India or elsewhere relate to the earth and to each other. So it's to do with the planning process. It's to do with the mindset of we just want more and more and more growth, GDP, etc. Or is it that no, we know that economy should be within ecology, both emanating from the root word oikos, which is home. And I remember a very interesting incident that Professor Dr. Satish Kumar, ecologist, activist, etc., from UK, when he went to the London School of Economics many years back, and he asked them, where is your department of ecology? They said, why should we have a department of ecology? And he asked the dean of the London School of Economics, do you know the origin of the word economics? And she didn't know the fact that both economics and ecology come from the word oikos, which means home. And he asked her, he said, economics is about managing the home. Ecology is about understanding the home. How can you manage the home without understanding it first? So shouldn't your department of economics be within a larger school of department, university, whatever, of ecology? So that's the
fantastic.
Sort of
that was fantastic, Ashish.
Yeah. Satishji, tell me this. Of course, he chuckles when he tells me this, but it shows the tragedy of the discipline of economics, which actually underlies a lot of the kind of development planning that we do. So thanks, Simi, Arjun, Ambika, and everybody else from IMPRI to have organized this. And I very much agree with Himanshu. Let's see if maybe if you can organize another maybe series of sessions on how the environment has been dealt with over this government, but also maybe the last 30 years or 40 years or since independence, a bit of a historical view also on development and environment and its conflicts and contestations, and where it is we can go, including positive examples that can be brought to bear on the kinds of direction shifts that we would need, especially also emerging out of the pandemic.
Yes.
So my sincere thanks to all of you for this.
Yes, this year also COP26 is there. So we hope to make also some impact and also involve, I would say, legislators, as sir, you are also highlighting. Many of them also do ask us for questions also. So I also invite all of you for any specific policy issue or anything, we can really at least nudge from our part to highlight the issues through all of our things. So thank you so much, everyone. Simi, can you do a formal vote of thanks? Just to, yes.
So much to everybody. Thank you, sir. It was really very, very enriching. I really thank on behalf of Team IMPRI and India Water Portal, Kanchan ma'am, Indira ma'am, Himanshu sir, Devaditya, Ashish sir, it wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you so much. And also the audience, it was so engaging and proactive participation really helped us, fueled us. So many questions, and it actually only reveals the collective conscience amongst everybody to protect the environment. And Team IMPRI, Nidhi, Nikhil, Sunidhi, Manuswini, thank you for the presentation. It really helped the panel to go going. And Sir Ashish, sir, on your suggestion to create a forum, we would be certainly very interested and happy to voice, this would really help to voice our concerns vis-a-vis the environment. Let us keep this conversation going. It was really, really amazing, enriching, and thank you. Wish you all a very good evening, good night, and take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Team IMPRI. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, Indira. Thanks, Himanshu. Thanks, Devadit.
Thanks, Ashish, and everyone. Yeah.
And you'll send us the recording link.
We will.
Yes.
And Himanshu sir has given us many notes today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.